people from all over, from California, from Minnesota, a lot of folks here from San Diego. We've got New York represented, DC, West Virginia. Hey, Ben. I know, as I said before, that we have England represented here. We have Delaware, so it's very exciting for me to have this level of reach and to have an opportunity to talk to you all about what it takes to lead with power and poise. And I use both of those words very purposefully when you're having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. I'm looking forward to this topic. It's a presentation that I created actually for a half a day leadership training. And then January kicked in. And when January kicked in, between the conversations I was having with my clients, the conversations I was having with friends, the noise that was in my head, I realized that I really had to take what we were talking about, create a really condensed version, which is our quick hour together, and bring it to you. I want to give you some context for why we're talking about this. It was Wednesday, November 7th, and I was having what I thought was just going to be a bad day. I didn't sleep very well the night before. I am a perimenopausal woman. I woke up, opened up the mail that I hadn't checked the day before, found a water bill that was double what my normal water bill is, which is already pretty high here in California. And that sent me scrambling around the house to look for a leak. I found the leak. My kids were being difficult. I'm 99% sure I had an argument with my husband that morning. Whatever the specifics of the day were, I was having a very bad day. And my job is to stand up every day in front of absolutely brilliant leaders. Many of them are in this room today, and to show up for them, to help them think through big problems, challenges, fears, to help them reach their ambitions and their goals, and to teach them how to dream bigger. And there's a lot of me that goes into doing that. I had a group coaching call, and I really did only think I was having a terrible day. But I usually start all my group coaching calls with a centering activity. And I asked my program manager, April, to lead that mindfulness centering exercise. But the second she had us slow down and pause and tune in, I started crying. I just was leaking. The tears were coming down. I could not help it. And I realized I wasn't just having a bad day, I was having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And I realized in that moment of slowing down that I was barely holding it together. I'm very lucky in the women I work with. We build strong bonds. I've built enough trust, luckily, that I could let them know that, share that with them. And I gave them a choice. I said, we can move ahead with the topic I prepared for today's call, or we can talk about what it takes to lead when you're having a day where you're barely holding it together. And that is what they overwhelmingly chose. And that's why we are here today. I know that I've asked all of you in one manner or another, what do you want out of this time? But you're here now, this morning, and this morning's circumstances are different from yesterday's circumstances or the day before or last week or last month when you signed up for this. So I'm going to invite you to take a minute to reflect at a really, really personal level. Why are you here today? What happens to you when you're having a terrible day? How does it affect you? Why is it so important to figure out how to manage those better? And who are you doing this for? So I'm going to give everybody a minute to really think about that. And I would strongly encourage you, if you have pen and paper, jot down some notes. And then if you feel like it, jump in the chat and share that. Ben writes he wants to be better at supporting his wife who has a high pressure corporate job. And that's leadership, Ben. Showing up for other people, being there for other people is about leadership in your couple. It's about leadership in your relationship. These are important things. Diana wants to walk the talk. I feel that. Christina wants to have a more calming and focused impact on those that she leads around her when truly tough moments are happening. Teresa was inspired by the topic and see if she can give that kind of inspiration. Anytime you dedicate time like this to a webinar, to a coaching session, whatever, it is so important not just to show up and passively be a listener, but really think about how you're going to use the information you're getting. So, why are you here? I asked that question to many of you and I got several responses. Some of you are here because you're used to performing at a really high level, and you want to make sure that doesn't get compromised just because life hits you upside the head. Many of you said that you're here because you want to know how to keep your cool, how to think strategically and responsively, even when your emotions are riding really high. What you want ultimately is to be able to bounce back from a terrible day, to figure out how to pick yourself up, how to keep moving forward, even when you're having bad times. And there's been a lot of high emotions for a variety of reasons. But I'll just, for elephant in the room sakes, like the political landscape has made things really hard. I got a text from a friend who works in affordable housing and said they just lost 5.5 million from HUD because they use the word equity because they talk about equity in their messaging. The impact that she wants to make has just been massively undermined. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of reactivity. The thing is, everybody has bad days. But once in a while, a bad day can turn into a really horrible one. All of you in this room are leaders in one way or another. You're used to operating at a really high level. And if you're like my clients, you're probably used to operating at a really high level because you're smart, hardworking, emotionally intelligent, caring, because you're accountable, and also probably because you are very resilient. And those qualities have allowed you to navigate and will allow you to navigate the average bad day with power and poise, whether or not you think that's the case. But those same attributes can actually become a massive liability when you're having a terrible day. So today, I want to walk you through the framework I use with my clients when they're going through something that's pushing them to their limits. Normally, this is a half a day workshop. And in the half day workshop, we go into detail and we practice all these things step by step. But everybody's busy. So today, with the hour we have, I'm going to focus on three things. I want to focus just initially on the difference between a bad day and a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day so that you can start distinguishing those two things. I want to talk about what happens to your brain and what happens to your thinking and therefore your ability to lead and to lead effectively when you're having one of those days. And then I want to go over a 3-step process to help you notice, mitigate, and ideally address these terrible, horrible days with power and with poise. Before we do that, I want to check in one more time and make sure we have a shared definition of what it looks like to have a very bad day. I shared with you the bad day that led to this presentation, but I could go back and think of the day I was working as a psychologist and the front desk at my office told me that my aunt called, this aunt who never calls me, and I knew in that moment my father had died. My father had cancer and I knew he had died. And I still had a docket full of patients that I needed to see. And so it was processing all those emotions until I got home and cry and break down and still show up at work the next day because I had a schedule full of patients who needed to see me who'd waited months to come in at the place I was working at before. I could talk about as a perimenopausal woman, just sometimes an average day. Earlier this week, I lost it on my family, screaming full volume, no holds bar. Why does nobody in this house care about keeping things looking as nice as I do? And then having to come down from the shame of losing it like that and walk into my office and be on and show up for the women I show up for. Hopefully, you'll recognize yourself in these words. Some no good days are a result of uncontrollable external factors, like losing work friends or facing layoffs, or worrying whether your business will make it through turbulent economic and political times. The impact of these days can hit you sporadically, but repeatedly again and again. It's like the aftershocks of an earthquake. Some terrible days can be part of a longer process of grief and loss. And one day you're fine, and the next day it hits you so hard, you can barely keep it together. Bad days can come seemingly out of the blue when people knowingly push your buttons or not and challenge you and trigger all your insecurities and your fears. And often When you have a no good, very bad day, it's like having an out of body experience. One moment you're Bruce Banner and you've got it together, and the next you're the Hulk. And the problem with turning into the Hulk is that it can leave you with major shame and a guilt hangover. And that's not even mentioning the consequences of any negative actions you took when you were seeing green. So, the first step to handling a terrible, no good, very bad day with power and poise is admitting that you are in it. You can't address what you don't see or what you don't understand. I share this and I start with this because it is literally a fundamental principle of everything I did as a clinical psychologist and everything I still do today as an executive coach. Many of my clients, when they come to me, and ladies, feel free to call me out if I'm wrong on this one, but when they come to me, they think that they're coming to learn strategies and skills. But the real magic, as far as I'm concerned, happens when they learn to embrace the pause. When we create opportunities for them to slow down, to think deeply, to analyze their thoughts and their habits, to understand what's driving them, what their beliefs are, what their emotions are, and how these things impact how they lead, how they operate as business owners, and how they show up as human beings. I want to take a small pause and I want you to think about, if not a recent, a really highly salient, no good, terrible day that you experienced, a kind of day you hope never to experience again. What is one word or phrase that described how it affected you? Just think about that for a second. Not this is what happened. How did it affect you? How did it feel? How did you feel in that moment? If you feel like it, share what it was like for you. Neela says it feels like having no control over anything and picturing worst case scenarios. Cognitively, that's called catastrophizing. And cognitively, although we talk about having no control, it's a belief system. It's helplessness. Helplessness is the belief there is nothing I can do. And what we feel is a certain quality of anxiety. We say, it feels like I have no control. Irene says rage and complete loss of hope. At Noworthy, we have guest experts come and talk, and we had somebody come and talk about perimenopause. And she described being in a meeting with somebody who, if I remember well, was interrupting her repeatedly. And the rage she felt, she had absolutely no control over because it's hormonally driven. And the need to keep herself together and needing to pull that in together to show up at the meeting and needing to do it without beating yourself up. Amanda is talking about feeling discombobulated and confused. There's the out of body experience where you don't know what's going on. You can't catch your bearing. Christina talks about feeling scared and helpless. Sarah about fear. April mentions loss of hope. Ben, tell me about that word abused, if you don't mind.
It was actually somebody that I had thought about working with as a coach. I just felt abused in the way that he just kept coming at me and coming at me. And then I allowed this guy to live free in my head for way too long. And I kept replying back to him and he just wouldn't take no for an answer. And then he started like berating me for not choosing to work with him. It was absolutely astounding that a coach would have that type of behavior. And I'm a career coach myself.
There's a massive qualitative difference between just having a bad day and having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And the qualitative difference is about intensity. It's the difference between saying, I'm feeling worried and anxious and annoyed, and I'm feeling, and I want to go back to these words, fearful, like deep fear. Right? It's the difference between feeling irritated and feeling rageful, feeling like you're a little spacey and feeling discombobulated and confused. The point here is when you're having a terrible, no good day, it affects all the things. It is not just about being a little bit tired. It is not just about being a little bit annoyed. It is not just about not operating at the top of your game. It affects your mood, your thinking, your behavior, your physical health, literally, your communication, your patience, your productivity, your energy. One of my clients, I'm going to call her Tracy for privacy. She's a senior leader in a male dominated industry. and in a male dominated office. Actually, she's the only female senior leader in that space. She happens to work alongside a very challenging boss who sees himself as a really good guy and a great leader. He's got a lot of blind spots. He's actually quite biased. He tends to throw her under the bus when projects don't go smoothly. He is absolutely unwavering in his commitment to labeling any conflict that occurs between her and peers as her fault. And he dumps on her because she is so good at what she does that he is constantly dumping more and more projects on her. Normally, she can handle this pretty well, except for one day when I got a text from her that said, "Can you call me?" She had just blown up at him. She had laid it on him, no filter, no holds bar, full volume, expletives, and all, and stormed out of the office. Initially, I think it felt really empowering to her. She was ready to quit. But as she started to calm down, the gravity of her response hit her. By the time I talked to her, she was tearful. She was scared. She was still absolutely furious, caught between feeling guilty about her response, but feeling really justified in why it had happened. And it was only noon. She had a full half day of work left in front of her. The thing with a terrible day is it hijacks your system. And not only does it hijack your system in the moment, it creates a self sustaining cycle. So I want to show you what it looks like because this cycle right here might look simple, but it is the key. It is a fantastic model to start getting a hold of and managing bad days and therefore being able to manage terrible, horrible days. This is a cognitive behavioral cycle. It's a model that's used to explain how external factors, any situations that you're dealing with, that you're going through, impact the way you think. They can trigger negative beliefs, negative assumptions. They can trigger long-term worldviews that then in turn produce negative feelings. The more catastrophic the thinking, the more extreme the thinking, the more generalized the thinking, the stronger the emotion. And the combination of these beliefs and these emotions will lead to and reinforce poor behavioral choices, which in turn drive more negative outcomes and situations, often reinforcing negative beliefs and emotions. And you can cycle through this vicious cycle again and again and again. You can do it thousands of times in a few hours, or you can do it over days and days. Show physical hands. Who here has ever had a day where they had something happen, they responded a certain way, it wasn't their perfect way of responding, and then they just played that conversation over and over, not just for a few hours, but over days? That is a version of this cycle playing itself out. Every time your mind is calm, you start thinking about what you said and did, which produces some kind of belief about how you screwed up or how this was terrible or how people are not going to be able to forgive you. And you start in that moment feeling the anxiety and the guilt, all the what ifs come to the surface, and it disrupts how you respond. Suddenly you can't think or do the things you need to do in the moment, or maybe you find yourself going to apologize when you didn't need to apologize, or you double down when you didn't need to double down. Ben, I bet you that coach was going through a tough time. I bet you he really needed the business. I bet you somebody taught him that you have to challenge the objection, which is true, but didn't teach him how to deal with his own fear or discomfort when he was facing that objection. I love this model, and we'll come back to it again because it is a great way for you to break down when you're having a day where you feel discombobulated, overwhelmed, helpless, and figuring out exactly what's going on. On a side note, oftentimes when people are having really bad days, they try to make themselves feel better. One of my least favorite phrases in the world is when somebody says, "Oh, you just shouldn't care about that. You let that bother you." Who's ever been told that? You should just calm down, just chill. Don't let that bother you. Like, it's not that big of a deal. What people are saying is, hey, you have an emotion, turn it off. But if you're looking at this model, what I want you to realize is it doesn't work that way. Your emotions are knee-jerk reactions to your thoughts. So you think of your emotions as external manifestations of what's going on internally. If you want to change the way you feel, you need to change the way you think. Oftentimes, when we are having terrible, horrible, no good, very bad days, if we want to change the way we think, we need to first start by changing the way we're approaching our day. One of you, I cannot remember who, so I apologize, When I asked them, what do you want out of this? Said, I'm really good at knowing what to do in terms of deep breathing and relaxation and mindfulness exercises. I want something deeper. I think those are all really good practices, but we're going to talk about the difference between the practices you create that are long-term, long-lasting practices and things that you need to do in the moment to deactivate your nervous system so that you can then do the work to change your thinking, so that you can actually get control over your emotions, not because you're shoving them in a corner and not paying attention to them, but because you're actually resolving the fears or the anxieties or the beliefs that are driving those emotions. At the conclusion of this, I'll also send you a sheet with an outline of the 5 most common thought distortions or thinking patterns that kick in when we're having terrible days, because there's certain thinking patterns that kick in for you when life isn't going well. And if you learn how to recognize them, if you have a label for them and you learn how to recognize them, it's going to be so much easier to respond to them and deactivate them so that you move into a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle. Before I move into this part, I want to stop again and check in with everybody. How are you doing? How's everyone doing? Can you go to the reaction button at the bottom, choose an emoji. I'm just really curious how everybody is doing right now. King, I get hearts from Mariana, some thumbs up from Irene and Diana, lots of thumbs up, Nevin as well, smiles from Neela, smiles. Oh, Tessa's having a moment. April as well. Tessa and April and Lillian, is there anything that I can do in this moment? Is there anything that we're bringing to the table that is making those frowny faces bigger? Or is it just the way the day is going?
This is exactly what I needed today. Like the timing of this is perfect.
I am glad to hear that, April. And hopefully, as there will be more of this, but also let's normalize this. My goodness, it's been really terrible. I have another question here, just for show of hands. Who here is in business for themselves? If you're working in a corporate space, if you're leading a team, having a terrible day and having a terrible mindset can have an incredible impact on your ability to lead, on your ability to show up at work and feel happy. If you're running your own business, walking into work day after day with thoughts like, things are terrible, this is catastrophic, can destroy your business. I spent all of 2024 undoing those thinking patterns for myself. And the difference in how I conducted my business and my joy in walking into work and how my business impacted me, and literally in my numbers, so in my level of revenue and profit, were significant.
So, Alessandra, what did you mean as the difference between virtuous and vicious in the
And a
last?
vicious cycle? Sure. Let me go back to this. So, the vicious cycle is when I have a belief that triggers a negative emotion and I act in accordance with that negative emotion and belief, even though it might not be actually real. And so that's going to exacerbate my situations. Let's just say you're walking around and your belief is nobody cares what I have to say. It doesn't matter. Here I am. I finally reached this position. I'm at the C-level role, and still nobody cares what I have to say. That's the belief. And of course, that would make us feel a number of different senses of upset, and probably like some level of anger, anxiety, some level of hopelessness. And let's say my behavior pattern in response to that is to say, fuck it. I'm just not going to share anything. Why should I make the effort? I'm just so tired. I'm so tired of having to say, back up, prove, repeat, only to hear some other person repeat it and then them get the credit. I'm done. So now we're in situations where you're not communicating your value. You're not communicating your thoughts. You're not communicating your ideas, which means that people are coming to you less and less frequently to get your input because you're so quiet. And the less people come to talk to you, the more it reinforces this idea that nobody cares what you have to say. You have no power in the situation. The more upset, the angrier, the more dismissed it makes you feel, the more quiet. That's a vicious cycle. A virtuous cycle might happen when we notice, we've taken the time to notice what's going on. And I catch myself and I go, is this true? What's true is bias is still present. What's true is I do still need to fight. What's also true is that sometimes it's not so much the recognition that matters, although you all know I strongly believe in the power of recognition. Sometimes what matters is implanting an idea. and having that idea bloom and going, see, I know what I say matters because change is occurring because of the insights and the contributions that I've brought into this space. Shifting that thinking can start alleviating one portion of the action. But even if we're still feeling miserable at the emotional level, saying, despite feeling this way, because I've looked at my thinking, I am going to change my behavior pattern. I don't talk about faking it till you make it. I talk about acting despite. Faking it is pretending it's not happening. Acting despite means I am in full recognition that this is happening and that I'm feeling this way and that it's impacting me. But I also know that there's a portion of this that is in my head, and therefore I am going to act despite. And by doing that, creating opportunity. That's the virtuous cycle. Irene?
So just for clarity, because this is what goes on in my head is, so I'm a woman in STEM, so I tend to be like the only gal with a hard hat out in the plant. And I will do things to spite my naysayers. So it's not acting despite, but I'm acting to spite. And I don't know if that's very virtuous, but it does get me out of the rabbit hole of the vicious cycle. So I don't know if that's exactly the turn that you're talking about.
There's an alignment. If you and I were working together, Irene, I would figure out how to get part of that out only because energetically it cost you. Mariana is also one of the only women in the room on the scene in a male dominated spaces. And we recently had a conversation about the energy that's involved and the difference between having that energetic drive push you to do great things, push you to nevertheless move forward, but removing all the anger and the painful energy behind that, which actually buries you. Mariana, you might have better words than I just used to describe this. Can you summarize what we talked about when that happened?
It's a lot of drag to bring your own baggage with you. So once you understand your baggage, if you put it down and come to it from your own place, distinct of your baggage.
Because that's my pivot is I'll show you. You think I can't do it, just watch. That's actually quite fun for me. But then bundling it up, going, boop, all right, go.
It's a lot easier. You can let it go.
Yeah.
I mean, that the part of letting go to move forward, that part is hard. But once you can let go, I think that's the power. It will drive you further because you're not going to have the drag of the baggage of why you're moving in that direction, why the thought pattern behind it.
Cool. Thank you for being a kindred spirit.
I want you to think about this, right? It's simple but complex. The ideas are simple. The model is simple. The process is complex. It's layered. It's a skill set. We're going to talk about this right now. It all starts with self-awareness. But I want you to know that there is a qualitative difference in how you show up in the world. There's a difference in what kind of impact you can make, on how far you can go, on how long you can withstand things when you're entering in a space already taxed by a very high negative emotional state. And when we think about having horrible, terrible, very bad, no good days, that is what is happening. We're entering spaces in very high negative emotional states. So I think of these days as crisis days. We're going to talk about crisis management in this context, but in the longer term, for those of us who are experiencing chronic moments where we feel really undermined and pulled down, it's taking this time to pause and look at what's driving me. What do I want to keep? I want to keep this belief, this fundamental belief in my value, in my ability to make a difference, in my competency. And what I want to remove is all the fuck you part of that, right? Because holding on to that anger in that way, that is exhausting over time. There's a great book called Rage Becomes Her. It's very hard to read, women, but it talks about the physical impact of holding on to low grade and high grade anger and rage for women. Right. And there is documentation on physiologically how unhealthy it is for us. So when we can learn to do that more subtle work, it's really helpful. But let's talk about this for a second. The way all of this starts, by the way, is it all starts with awareness. In this 3-step process, Self-awareness is step number one. I'll go back to what I said before. If you don't see it, you can't fix it. Every single true solution to a problem starts with proper awareness of the problem. And what I see with a lot of my clients is if you're caught in the rat race, if from the moment you wake up in the morning, you're on the go, responding to emails, responding to your family's needs, responding to clients, responding to direct reports, responding to your CEO, responding to your board, back to emails, back to your family, there is no space and no opportunity to catch your breath and build self-awareness. Again, a show of the hand. Who here feels like their days are just go, no time to breathe, no time to slow down, and you're always in a reactive mode? Not every day, but enough days that like it clicks. I was about to say, Christina, I didn't see your hand go up for a second. I'm like, I know what your days look like. That is most of us. Also, who here uses their phone as their alarm? Okay, for all of you who raise your hand, do me a favor. Please, after this, go online, go onto your favorite non-Amazon online retailer and buy an alarm clock. Because when you use your phone as your alarm, what do? You grab your phone, you turn off the alarm, and then you see all your notifications that came in while you were sleeping. Maybe you turn off sleep mode and you see all the notifications, and immediately, boom, you're in it. You're in the rat race. You might think you're getting up, drinking your coffee, brushing your teeth, saying hello, chilling in the morning. You just set your brain into the rat race. And if your day is going to be a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, you just robbed yourself of one of the moments that could have helped you recalibrate. Tessa says she recently switched to an alarm clock and has stopped using her phone. It's expensive but beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing the link. I love it. I have to say, I use this thing and it requires a lot of self-discipline in the morning because it want to show me the notifications to not tap on it. I want to give you an example of what this can look like and the impact it can have. I have a client, we're going to call her Reese. These are all completely made up names. I rarely will give an actual client's name when I'm giving her story. And she operated like that. Every day she'd wake up, she'd check her phone, she'd check her emails, she'd get her family ready for the day, she'd run to work, she'd check in on her team, she'd check in on her clients, she'd check her email again. She'd run from meeting to meeting, solving problems and crises. That was her day, every day. And then she'd go back home and her mom lives with her. So she's taking care of her mom. She's taking care of an adolescent child. She's taking care of a spouse. Her terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day took place on the day her body literally gave in on her. She run herself ragged and literally she broke. I remember because earlier that day, she and I were talking on the phone. She said, my back's kind of hurting. Her back gave out. It required her having surgery and it took months of healing. So the bad day wasn't a crisis, a specific event. It was slowly building up. And this is where resilience can be a false friend. Reese was driven, she was caring, she's hardworking, she's incredibly resilient, and she pushed forth all the time without ever stopping, without ever slowing down, without ever checking in on herself. And she was slowly breaking, but day after day, she just put that aside, right? Just get stuff done. And the only time she started truly noticing it is when her body gave in. One of the first things we did with her was to shift her behavior. Very specifically, what we did is we taught her how to slow down and how to create opportunities to pause and check in and build self-awareness every single day. Later, when we could re-regulate, that's when we started looking at her thinking. We could start understanding what was going on with her assumptions and her beliefs and the pattern that was breaking her down. So I have a few favorite check-ins, favorite practices that people can use to create a pause, but I am a huge proponent of small, easy, bite-sized check-ins. When I am a smart woman, which is not every day, I start my day and I force myself, no matter how rushed I feel, to take 10 minutes to close my eyes, to breathe in, and to ask myself how I'm feeling. On the days I'm smart enough to do that, on the days I don't give in to the rat race, I navigate my days better. When I notice that I'm having a bad day, I can catch it before it becomes a terrible, horrible, no good one. When I notice I'm having a terrible, no good day, I can implement some of the steps we're going to talk about in a minute so that day doesn't completely spiral out of control. So I want to walk you very rapidly through one of my favorite ones. And I can share you I can share some information with you on the other one. So we're going to do what's called the 5-step check-in. And noteworthy women, you know what that looks like. Sylvia, you know what that looks like. Sylvia, when's the last time you did this? Sylvia used to work with me. She's not currently working with me. When's the last time you did a 5-step check-in?
I could not even tell you.
My
So
goodness.
this is a good refresher.
It's a good refresher. Okay, so I'm going to have everybody in this room just close your eyes for a second. I'm closing my eyes too. I want you to breathe in and out of your nose for a minute. And just notice where in your body you're carrying tension. Because I know you are. It's not an if, it's just where. Strangely for me today, it's like at the back of my spine, like between my shoulder blades. That's a new one for me. And then always at my throat. And so with the next 2 breaths out, I just want you to focus on that part of your body where you're carrying the majority of your tension. And I just want you to picture the muscles there going loose and limp, coming undone, feeling heavier or sagging. Do you want to release? So those are steps 1 and 2. We check in, which is the body scan. We relax, which is just allowing our body to let go, to unwind, which is going to allow your brain to work much more effectively. And now you assess and just ask yourself, what is going on right now in this moment that's contributing to this tension and anxiety? Maybe you have a running list, you have a meeting after this, something's going on, your day didn't start well. What is it about your world today, right now, that's having your body prepare for a fight, which is what that tension is? If we're doing this full exercise, you can open your eyes if you'd like to. The next thing we do is talk about addressing. I'd say take 2 minutes, 10 if you need that many, and ask yourself, what can I do in the next few minutes that's either going to address what I am stressing about, what's affecting me, or help me relax more? So address the physical manifestations of my stress. And then the 5th step is plan. Your brain is not designed to think critically or strategically in high stress modes. So we want to relax our body so that our brain can think more critically. But then I might say, I need to put some time aside to create a plan around managing or mitigating this problem. That's the 5th step. So check in, relax, assess, address, plan. I will share this with you. I teach the women I work with to do this at least once a day. If I'm really lucky, I get them to do it 2 to 3 times a day. There are a variety of ways this can be built in, but the goal is to take note of where you are so that you can start managing that. And you can know, okay, I'm feeling really stressed today. I'm going to be having these conversations. I have to watch how I'm going to show up in these conversations, because when I'm really stressed and when it's tied to this kind of thinking, my habit loop is to do this one thing or this other thing. The first step to managing a terrible, horrible day is to check in with yourself and just note those. Yes, Christina, I can name those steps again and I'll send them to you. So it's check in, that's the body scan. Relax. When I notice where in my body I'm carrying tension, I'm going to focus mentally on that part of my body. And as I breathe out, I'm not going to worry about relaxing my whole body from head to toe. I don't care about that, just that part. Assess. And the assessing it's what is going on right now that I am feeling? What's going on right now that I'm feeling really stressed? What's going on right now that my tension is here? What is contributing to this state of tension? And the state of tension is literally your body coiling up, ready to explode, like ready to evade something or ready to fight something. So I want you to think about physical tension. It's like bracing yourself for a punch. So when your body's in tension, you are bracing yourself. If you've got nothing you truly need to brace yourself against, you want to relax your body. It's very stressful physically, emotionally, to be in that state of tension. Once I've assessed, once I have a better sense of what's going on, that I'm feeling tense and the nature of my tension, then I can start addressing what can I do? If I'm telling myself I'm feeling really anxious right now because I'm telling myself there are 1,000 things to do, there's no way I can get everything done, I'm going to drop the blah, blah, blah. Addressing might be to say, if that thought is true, I can stop telling myself I have to do all the things. I just said it's not possible. If it's not true, if it's just that it's a lot, then maybe I need to structure my day. Maybe I need to figure out what I'm going to focus on. And I'm getting ahead of myself because we're going to talk about that in a minute. So step 1, check in. Step 2, when you become aware of a creeping or a raging terrible day, the next essential step you need to go through is determine what's going on. This step is not only going to help you establish better systems and strategies so that you can manage the mood and its triggers, it's going to help you figure out the best solution and whether that best solution is to tap out. And I'm going to talk about tapping out before we end. This is where that cognitive model comes in really handy, right? I'll send you a terrible day action plan, but in this plan, we're going to ask you these questions. Situationally, what's going on right now? Emotionally, how are you feeling? Do not just use the words upset. Do not just use the word stressed. Qualify those words. What kind of upset? What kind of stress? Try to think about the intensity. Am I a little bit anxious or am I freaking out? Am I feeling stuck or am I feeling completely helpless and hopeless? Am I feeling a little sad today or am I downright depressed? Being depressed and having depression are two very different things. All of us feel depressed, and depressed is a combination of sadness and hopelessness mixed together. It's not just sadness. Take 5 minutes on one of those days to answer these questions on a sheet, and you'll see the solutions you'll seek. You'll see whether the need is just to calm your emotional state. You'll see whether the need is to try to bounce back from feeling miserable, or whether there are better, more involved actions you need to take. But ultimately, all of this is to help you define the root of the problem before you move towards a solution. That is the goal. And if all you know is, I'm about to lose it today and punch this person, you've not defined the root of the problem. If all you know is, I want to punch this person because they keep on interrupting me, you've still not defined the root of the problem. You've just described a situation. This person keeps on interrupting me. You've described an intrusive thought, the picture of you punching them in the face, and you've maybe described an emotional state, rage. But what is it about them interrupting you? So what is it about this person specifically? What is it that's going on here that's going to help me do things better? The last thing, the third step, is you got to create a plan. Plan involves first an action towards self-management. When you are having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, the first thing you need to do is calm your nervous system. I'm not telling you you have to stop feeling what you're feeling. I'm not telling you need to get over whatever is going on. I'm telling you that when your autonomic nervous system is activated, it hijacks your brain. You cannot think properly. So all the things you've been told about learning how to take 10 deep breaths, how to calm, they're critical in those moments. They're not nice to haves, they're must haves. The 5-step check-in can help you do that. The art of nothing practice can help you do that. You might know how to do other things. When in doubt, ChatGPT and Google have a list of 10 things you can do to calm your nervous system when you're having a terrible day. You don't have to have all the solutions. You don't have to remember everything. Just search it. The next thing you absolutely have to do when you realize you're having a terrible day is realize you're not going to get everything done. Those hardworking, those super resilient qualities I talked about, they work against you. I know too many women who have terrible days and they think they're going to proceed according to plan. You cannot proceed according to plan. Gentlemen, you cannot proceed according to plan either, right? When you're having a terrible day, you have to sit down and go, what's the most important thing that needs to get done today? I'm forgetting everything else until that thing is done. And then the next thing you need to do is determine, can I get that done? Or do I need to delegate? I am a fan of delegation if you're lucky enough to have that option. I don't always have that option. I do sometimes, but I don't want to dump on April every time I'm having like a hard day or I get overwhelmed. Otherwise, I'm going to give April a hard day and overwhelm her. And eventually I'm not going to have an April around because she's going to say, screw that. It's too much work. I can't dump on our other assistants, but I can decide what is most important, decide whether I can do it. And I can delegate and ask for help. You really want to think of what single task or objective, and just one, do you need to focus on? What absolutely needs to get done before the end of the day, even though you're having a terrible day. And as I said, everything else gets put on hold. And that other question is, are you capable? Just because it needs to get done doesn't mean I should be the one doing it. Just because it needs to get done doesn't even mean I can get it done. So real leadership isn't about getting all the things done yourself. Real leadership is about knowing your limits and knowing your team and understanding who to engage when you've reached your limits. But sometimes the number one priority you have for a day is to take care of yourself. Sometimes you look at that to-do list and it's huge and there's this client who's expecting this thing and you look at it and you go, if I don't take care of myself today, tomorrow I will show up worse. The day after I will show up broken. The next week I will be picking myself off the ground. And I see this, I know it's really hard to do. I see it a lot with solopreneurs. I see it a lot with leaders who don't have teams that can be delegated to. I see it a lot with people who are at the apex of organizations who don't feel like there's anybody else that they can engage when there's something that they can't do. This is a skill you need to learn. You need to learn when the number one priority is taking care of yourself. Can somebody give me an example of something that if it doesn't get done, like a whole company, a whole team, a whole industry just blows up? Okay. I'm going to assume nobody unmuting themselves means nobody could think of a single action that if it's on your to-do list and doesn't get done, you're screwed. I want you to remember that the priority is taking care of yourself. This is a courageous act. It's beautiful modeling for the people you work with. The client I was talking about, Tracy, before, if she had taken a pause, if she had checked in, she probably would have realized she was not in a condition to talk to her boss that day. If she had known in advance how far gone she was in terms of just feeling overwhelmed, she probably would have stopped him at some point in time and said, can we put this on pause? And he's the kind of person she could have done that with. She needed that break. I will say this. In order to be able to do all of this, one of the things you really need is vulnerability. It's that vulnerability of admitting to yourself that you're imperfect and you can't handle all of it, but also you need the vulnerability to admit to other people that you're having a really terrible day. I had to tell my clients I was having a really terrible day. My eyes were leaking, but I probably would have told them even if my eyes hadn't been leaking, because I want to model that for them. That you can be perceived, and I might be saying things that aren't true, but I think they're true, that you can be perceived as being super confident and super powerful and super strong and still feel super broken and super weak and super lost. And that those two things don't negate one another. If you're lucky enough to work on a team, I am going to encourage you to find a point person, somebody you trust, who you can lean on when you're having a terrible day. I am going to encourage you to nominate that point person in advance, which means you have conversations with them before you have a terrible day about the fact that they're your terrible day point person. This has to be somebody who will have the courage to call you out when they see you going off the tracks, who's going to have the courage to tell you that you need to tap out of the game if that's what's going on. In many ways, I am that for many of my clients. So if they're having a terrible day, they know they can call me and we will talk through whatever's going on, and I will tell them whether they can proceed or whether they need to tap out. We will problem solve together. But if you're not working with a coach, if you don't have somebody like that in your life, find somebody you work with. Take a minute, everybody. We've got 5 more minutes. We're going to move into Q&A in just a second. But who's that person for you? Can you think of who it is? Write their name down. Go let them know how incredibly important this person is. When you have taken the time to really think a little bit more deeply, to take that pause we talked about before, that self-awareness pause, and to map out what it looks like when you have a terrible day, you might be able to come to them and say, hey, when you see me show up on a Zoom meeting saying these kind of things, I'm probably having a terrible day. Can you check in with me? Hey, the next time I feel like I'm completely coming unhinged, I'm going to talk to you. I need you to work with me through these next things. I know that the higher up you are on the chain, the more people you have counting on your leadership, the more important it is to have this conciliary, like partner in your business. Your spouse is not the right person to do this. If you're not married, whatever, your romantic partner is not the right person to do this. Your kid is not the right person to do this. Your best friend is, it depends on how honest your relationship is with your best friend. You need somebody who's got skin in the games if you screw up at work and who really cares about you at work to do this. Modeling this, by the way, will make you look like a total badass. Just in case you were wondering, it's not going to make you look weak at all. So 3 simple but not easy steps to play out, with the most important one being building practice so you can check in. None of this works. None of this starts unless you're really self-aware. And that takes time. The biggest mistakes I see leaders make, both when I was a psychologist and today, is trying to push through or attempting to ignore or get over terrible days. It's the worst thing you can do. It will blow up in your face. It will have really negative consequences, the least of which will be you feeling guilty and ashamed at some point in time about not showing up perfectly. So get in the habit of checking in, of figuring out what's going on, and have that point person ready. Okay. What questions do you have? What insights do you have? What thoughts? What's one insight you got from today? Irene, you have your hand up. Yep.
I really appreciate the 5 steps in the pivoting and the clarification. So to me, that was very helpful. And I guess my Q&A component is you mentioned several times that, being perimenopausal, that's an easy word to say, there's so many biochemical reactions occurring in your body that you are completely not in control of, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just happened to you. And so where are there some good guidance for women who are about to go through it so that they know what to watch out for? I've been there, done that. There's going to be others that are going to go, crap, your body's just going to take over and I have no idea what's going on. And so where can we point them to?
And men, you have andropause too, just so you know that affects you. By the way, I was 44 when perimenopause kicked in. So it's not super early, but it's early enough. I've known people in their late 30s to have it kick in. Whether it's hormonally driven or not, the thing with really elevated mood states is that they can reach a point where it is entirely out of your control. I used to work with juvenile delinquents and in the prison systems, and we would teach these kids when to walk away and say that's the only thing that's going to work. For those of you, for anybody on the call who hasn't yet gone through perimenopause, there will come a time where suddenly you will feel one or a combination of these things. You will start forgetting your words. You will find it difficult to think, and you will start feeling really broken. And there's something wrong with you. And that can send you into a tailspin of a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. You will wonder if you have early onset dementia. If you've had children, it will feel a lot like the word loss you had when you were pregnant, but like at a completely different level. There might come a day where you find yourself periodically so incredibly and irrationally angry at people. And it doesn't make sense. And you've had this happen before in your life, but before you talk yourself off the ledge, and here you can't. It does not go away. You will have points where you sleep 7 hours and yet you wake up and you feel so freaking exhausted. Nothing's coming together. That is probably a sign that you're going into perimenopause. So what I tell people, or I'll tell you what I do, Irene, when I'm having a terrible day and I know it's menopausal, I remind myself what state I'm in. For me, it is literally about, first of all, tell my family, having a really bad day, don't push my buttons. I'll give them the heads up. But because I've done that self-assessment piece a lot, I know how it impacts my thinking. I can then watch for those thinking patterns, watch for the behaviors. It's this constant focus on acting despite. One of the great questions I was asked is, what do if I feel on the verge of blowing up in a conversation? How do I speak when there's a different version of what I want to say to come out? And I always tell people, you got to slow down. It is incredible the power that slowing down has, quite literally. If you're in a situation and you're in a conversation with somebody and that's when you realize, I'm having a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day, I am losing it, I am crawling out of my skin. Breathe, first thing. As you breathe, relax your body. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take on your 3 a.m. DJ voice and you are going to slow your talking down. You are going to slow the way you talk. You are going to slow the way you breathe. You are going to start asking questions, not giving answers. It sounds like what you're saying is you think there's going to be a lot of issues with implementing this plan. Am I correct? It's really interesting. I'm sensing a lot of resistance to this idea. Can you tell me more about it? I notice your voice just went up. You look pretty frustrated. Can you help me understand? The questions allow you to take a break, put the focus on somebody else, get more data from that person, slow down that speech. As you slow down the speech and you slow down your breathing, you slow down the speed of your thoughts. And instead of being that pressure cooker thing, everything comes back down. When I was a psychologist and people would come in with panic attacks into my office, this is exactly what I would do. I would slow my speaking down to about this pace to calm them down. And you all have heard me today, so you know what pace and what tone I normally speak, which is much faster and up here and full of energy. But you calm the way you're showing up in the world so you can calm yourself internally and get the hell out of Dodge before you blow up. Lynette.
So I just want to say that my biggest takeaway out of this is how important doing these check-ins are, right? The calming, thinking about it. But I know me and I don't stop moving. How can I make sure that I'm maybe almost scheduling time, right? Putting my calendar so nobody can interrupt me for 10 minutes here and there and just drop you in there, a little pop-up reminder that goes, okay, check in with yourself today, or as you said, check in with your work friend or sport group, whoever it is, just to make sure. Because I know I'll get obsessed with a project I'm working on, or like the 20 different projects I'm working on, and not allow myself that time which is needed, right? Because figuring out how to do that on a consistency is
I love
hard.
that you answered your question in asking the question. So one of the things is really pragmatically, this thing I told you not to have next to you when you sleep, don't have it next to you when you sleep. But what you can do, and you will totally ignore 3/4 of them, let's just be honest, but is set a reminder schedule. Literally set alarms to go off at certain points of the day. You will ignore the vast majority of them. But the times you don't ignore it will allow you to start establishing a pattern. The other thing I tell people is there's a great book by Charles Duhigg called The Power of Habit, fantastic book. And he talks about building new habits onto existing loops. So I don't know about your morning routine. I'm going to give you mine. You probably didn't want to know it. I roll out of bed, I pee, I brush my teeth. That's where my day starts, in that order. So I might choose to tie a new habit to one of those two first actions. And I might put on my mirror, while you brush your teeth, close your eyes and start the check-in. Maybe the only time I get that check-in is first thing in the morning. It's a little bit like breakfast. The first step is the most important. You set that. I love using my focus timer. As I said, I don't always listen to it, but when I do, I use those 5-minute breaks between work batching to relax. I always schedule a lunch. Dear Lord, if there's one of the best things you can do other than not having your phone as your alarm, the other one is schedule a lunch and actually have it. We know studies have shown judges make better decisions. Kids get way higher scores on tests. Pilots, surgeons operate better when they take a lunch break. But that lunch break, if you're not scrolling on your phone, trying to do work, answering email, if you're really stopping to just eat for 5 minutes, is a great opportunity to go, yeah, I'm really stressed. What's going on? I'll share two strategies with you, and the art of nothing process I used exactly because of the problem you're having. And it's these micro breaks that serve as a really good pressure release valve throughout your day, and then give you that opportunity. And the more you do it, the more the habit kicks in pretty nicely. How about the rest of you who are still on this call? Any questions? What's your biggest insight? Can you jump in the chat and just tell me what's your biggest insight from today? I was looking, Mariana says she needs to be more vulnerable with her conciliaries. I'm glad. I see people writing they're having hope, they understand the importance of self check-ins and the breaks. It really all starts there. This is really important work. If you can do it for yourself, if you can have people help you do it, absolutely do that. If you can't and you still need it, if you're functioning really at the top of your game and you want to continue operating at that level, if you want to have more conversations with me and women like Mariana, like we're accepting new one-on-one and new group coaching and Noteworthy member, which is its own thing at Noteworthy. And if you're curious what that looks like, that QR code is to schedule a connection call. I'm not going to sell. We're going to get to know each other on that call. I don't even know if you're right for Noteworthy. You don't know if Noteworthy is right for you, but we can figure it out. And if it's not us and you still need the help, I probably know somebody, right? If you're listening to this and you're like, oh my goodness, my team needs to hear this, it's a wonderful half day presentation. And I'm really sad that we need it so much this year, but it is here. And I love doing this work. But beyond all of this, I will be sending you an email later on today with a lot of resources, this worksheet. I invite you to share these resources far and wide, right? They are proprietary, they're mine, but they're out there to make people operate better and function better. So please feel free to share them with your team and share them with the people in your life. Use them. Come back to me if you have questions on how to integrate this. My goal is to make sure great leaders can operate at the highest level and continue doing great things. And I don't care whether said great leaders are clients of mine or not. If you're great, I want to support your success. So thank you very much. And I'm going to wish you all an absolutely wonderful day. Bye.